Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. This is episode number 205B, and we will be talking about Space 1999 this evening, and the focus will be Dragon's Domain, with it being Friday the 13th and also being Halloween month. How more appropriate can that be than that? But first, I want to introduce my very special guest. He's a filmmaker. He's a director, he's a producer, he's a writer, and he's also my friend. And I want to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Morris. Jeffrey.
Hey, welcome. Roy. How's it going? Hi, everybody.
Good. Jeffrey,
right.
I love the opening credits. I have to say thank you again so much. I want to give credit where credit is due. Thank you for helping for me to have this and just to kind of give a revamp to the show's energy level. I mean, when you come in and when you see that, it's really awesome. So I just want to say thank you. And I want to give a big thank you to Frederick Hugen. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Haugen.
I'm sorry.
Haugen. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
And then also in regards to the original music, Michael Nelson, and which you produced also. So thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing is, I wanted you to have. Well, first off, I think your show is super cool. And and as we've gotten to know each other and developed a friendship over the last year or two here, I really felt like what you're doing is important and really cool. And I want people to get that. Opening to me gives the energy of what I feel the importance of what you're doing is. You know, there's a time period of the that kind of late 50s through the early 80s, right, where there was really interesting stuff, and we can't forget that, and I love how you're keeping it alive and you're talking about it. So and the thing that's so cool about that opening is I can just watch it over and over and over again. It's a lot of fun. It's just so many memories and so many cool things. And the piece of music, the whole goal with that piece of music was actually to vibe off the era and really, like if we were going to have like the opening credits of a TV show, a sci-fi show from 1975, that's what that music is. That's what we're trying to do. So it
really encompasses it. And it's funny too, because I was just kind of like running a test before about an hour earlier with my son Rye, and he was in the background, kind of like how we were before we came on, and he's just kind of jamming to it, and he's loving it, and he's smiling, and he's really feeling the energy, and it was just so cool.
That's awesome. So he dug it too. He digs it too.
Absolutely.
That's great.
In fact, when I sent it to him, he said, "Dad, I watched this like maybe 5 or 10 times over and over again."
That's great. It's great. I've done that too. Sometimes I've just gotten this mode where I'm like, I'll just watch that again. I just watch it 3 or 4 times. I just love it. So I'm really glad you like it, and I'm really glad it's working for you. So it's good.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to welcome our viewers that are out there tonight. So first, I just want to say hi to Jeff Rubel, who's joining us from out west. Jeff, great to see you out there. And Jerry's also in the house, Jerry. And Nancy is joining us from Canada. Great to see you out there, Nance. Martin is joining us from New York State. Great to see you out there as well, Martin. And
hey, Martin's got an interesting idea. You know what we should do? We should look at your show as having like multiple every season. Maybe now that we have that edit, we can go back and like next year we can do a new one. Right? So we freshen it. You know what I mean? So like it's just like the opening credits are different every single season or something. That could be fun.
Yeah. That could be a lot of fun. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I know. do TV shows do that anymore? You really don't. I mean, there was a point, not to start digressing, but I think maybe probably like in the 90s where they just launched the show and there was like no opening theme. It's just like they just have the credits on saying like starring whoever the star of the show is, and they'll name the title.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like there's a mix, like there's an art. Like I've noticed that a lot of the Apple TV shows and they all have opening credits. They do, and they seem to tweak them season by season. And some of the Netflix shows do that. You're right, but then you're absolutely right. There seemed to be kind of a network approach, or some of the syndication stuff coming into the late 90s, early 2000s, where they just would give you the name of the show, and it would be like 2 seconds long, 5 seconds. They remember Stargate kind of started getting that way, and so and everything. And it always bummed me out because I feel like there's an art to the opening credit.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? There's an art to that. It's something that's missing. It's like if I still go back and I think about, again, I watching Space 1999 for the first time last night in a long time. That opening credits just blew us away. It just absolutely, there's nothing like that, right? But then you think about it, I can think about all these different shows, Battlestar Galactica in the 70s, and Buck Rogers, and all those things, or even Knight Rider with those the awesome music, and you remember how they used to sometimes some shows would have the Knight Rider, they'd have the voice, a shadowy flight to the dangerous world of a man, and that you know what I mean, all that kind of voiceover stuff was really cool back then,
Well, it really defined the shows, because I mean, you watch the opening credits, and then it really pretty much laid the groundwork of what the show was going to be about, and it really set the tone, it set the stage, it set the energy level, kind of like what you were saying earlier, and it really just paved the way. And then it's like, you're going into watching a show like, and I'm not knocking the show, but immediately the one that comes to mind is Murphy Brown. I remember seeing that, where it just basically went right into the credits, and it was like, what just happened? But anyway, right. I don't want to get too far off. Just want to welcome a few other people out there. May is joining us. May, welcome.
Hey, May.
Chris is out there. Chris, welcome. Good to see you out there. He's saying one of my favorite episodes. It was certainly the inspiration of both Alien and Aliens. Yeah, absolutely. In regards to Dragon's Domain. Brian Jackson is joining us from the UK. Brian, welcome. Good to see you out there, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
And also Sue's joining us from Massachusetts. Welcome, Sue. And Andrew is joining us from Australia, from down under.
Andrew, how you doing?
Great to see you out there.
Good to see you.
Hey, Leslie. Leslie's joining us. Welcome, Leslie. Thanks for joining us. And Lou is joining us from Rhode Island. Lou, welcome. And Deborah's out there. She's joining us from Phillipsburg. And now we're thrilled to have you too, Leslie. Thanks for being out there. And I don't know if you're still vacationing or in Vermont, or if you're back in Pennsylvania, but thanks for tuning in. Much appreciated. And Shari's joining us. She's joining us from downstairs.
all the way.
And Suzanne is actually out there. Hey, Suzanne. Suzanne Peterson, Suzanne Heimer Peterson, who was Barbara Bain's stand-in for years 1 and 2. And she's Space 1999. And a friend. Welcome to the show. Good to see you out there, Suzanne. Leslie's saying she loved Knight Rider. And yeah,
we could play a game where we do one more thing where we do the opening credits again and see if people can guess. If you want, it could be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think folks out there would be. In fact,
I actually one more time.
Yeah, let me do that
because we can do that. Because we can do that.
Absolutely. Hey, Brennan, thanks for joining. Good to see you out there as well too.
Yeah.
All right.
It's really interesting. Brennan just mentioning year 2. It was funny because I actually was kind of interesting in the music from okay, I love the music, very great in the first season, right? But there's stuff to be said about the second season. It's really it's wild. That soundtrack is crazy, right? It's just got all this jazz influence and funk and R&B. It's got all this stuff going on, right? It was very, very 70s, but it was actually really well composed. I mean, I was reading an article about Derek Wadsworth and how some of the compositions he came up with, the musicians couldn't even play them. They were so complex, the stuff he was doing. They had to bring in really good musicians. But it was interesting when the show changed over second season. I'm always an open-minded guy. I was like, well, this is kind of cool. It wasn't first season, but it was kind of cool, And so I actually liked the credits for the second season. It's just different than you know, the vibe is different. You know, it's very, very different. It's like a completely different thing. So
I mean, it definitely has an energy of its own, and it kind of just it's motivating, and it's totally different than Barry Gray. I mean,
yeah, and I'll say this opening credits thing we just did, we were doing more trying to do season 2. That was kind of the edict that I gave the team was let's when Michael and I were developing this song, I was like, let's base it on kind of like we listened to Buck Rogers and season 2, Space 1999, and all these things, and then kind of just SWAT. Do you remember the show SWAT?
Of course,
yeah, SWAT, and so all these kind of 70s iconic theme songs, and stuff. And we kind of said, let's hit something, let's make something that's in the middle. So Michael and I have done a lot of music together, so that's what kind of how these kind of things happen. So
no, it definitely came across so well. I'm going to run it just real quick once more, and actually, we'll say for the folks out there, see if you can guess what episodes or movies the clips are from too. Here we go. Starting over.
You can't beat that rhythm guitar.
I like what Brian said. Brian said Space 1999 season 3 opening titles.
There you go. Yeah. So now that I said that, can everybody hear that I was definitely trying to do season? Well, it was season 2 mixed with 70s funk and SWAT and it's yeah.
A lot of fun.
A lot of fun. So yeah.
Hey, Bill Attenberg is out
Bill.
there. Good to see you, Bill. Yeah. In whatchamacallit, Jeff is saying,
yeah, baby.
Yeah, good eye, Chris. Good eye. Yes. And embarrassingly enough, Roy Batty from Blade Runner, I for whatever reason I wasn't connecting. So if
I had to put Roy in there because I just thought it was cool. Yeah. So we got him. We got Roy in there, and yep.
Before we get started, and before we start talking about delving into our main topic, I just wanted to share a slide real quick, and just to let the folks know, because we've been talking a lot about the big documentary, The Eagle Has Landed, the Kickstarter and everything that was going on with it. So just to give everybody an update in regards to where everything is at right now in regards to the film and moving forward. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about that just for a moment, Jeffrey, too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, we are, I'm actually getting on a plane tomorrow morning at 7:00 to fly from Minnesota to Indiana. And I'm going to drive down to Martinsville where our good buddy Todd Morton lives. And I have a crew meeting me there, and we're going to be spending all day Sunday shooting. I'm going to scout the shoot tomorrow, and then we're going to spend all day Sunday shooting and documenting Todd's story. That's the whole plan. So that's the very first shoot of the document of, well, we've obviously, we shot in Calgary, we shot at Louisville, we shot in Colorado Springs. So this is going to be our 4th shoot. But we are going to get moving here again. What we did is, as I said, the Kickstarter was very, very, it was successful in that it got us tons of attention. 2 things. It also, it got us, we reached literally millions of people to expose them to the project, which was phenomenal response. We actually, it was, I believe the number was, the story got out to about 83 million people. Okay.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And then it was showcased in over 250 media outlets. And I did, I don't know, over 30 podcasts and interviews. And the response, again, tremendously positive. the thing that I'm was very concerned about, because people were like, so first off, we raised $135,000. So that 135, when you look at that number, when of Kickstarters, there have been over 80,000 total Kickstarters. And in the 80,000, only less than 0.67% have raised over 100,000. So, so there's lots of Kickstarters that are like $5,000, $10,000, things like that, right? So to get into the 100,000 plus, that's a big deal. The issue was we set it at 500,000 because one of the things that people do often with Kickstarter is they'll say, we're going to deliver this product and we can do it for $100,000. And then they raise $100,000 and then they don't get the product made because it's not right. And because you've actually been on the ground with us since we've been talking way before I even had this idea, right? We were hanging out a year before I even had the idea. And then last year when I had the idea, we started talking about it, and you've seen the process of creating the story. What's the story we're going to tell? How do we get people engaged with this and really tell a story that actually will appeal not just to Space 1999 and Eagle fans, but to people all around the world, many of whom never ever heard of this, right? And the thing to me was, I thought it was very important to travel, to meet people, to see people where they live, to get to know them, as opposed to doing a 60-minute style thing where we set up in a studio and we have two chairs and I talk to someone, ask them questions, and we show stock photos or something, right? That's not going to move the needle. I just don't think it does. That could probably be made for $100,000, something like that. I think the audience for it's going to be about 500 people. It's just not, it's not going to work. And so when we worked with 0.0, the company out of New York, and we did a budget for the idea that you were around for when we first did it, the budget was about $2.5 million. That's where they were. I figured out how to bring it down to $500,000, and they're like, you're insane. And they were like, do a Kickstarter for $1 million. I was like, no, So my whole point of making it 500,000, long story short, was to be realistic about the number we would really require to make the quality of film we're trying to produce, with new visual effects, recreations of sets, virtual stage stuff, all that kind of work, right? So I think it was an incredible success in that it garnered us attention and it got people on board, and it proves. I've also heard that there are a lot of people who do Kickstarters now to prove that there's an audience, not necessarily expecting to raise all the money, but to raise awareness with the Kickstarter, right? And Kickstarter themselves got involved with us. They liked the project, and they actually said, we're really impressed with you raising 135,000. And they said, if you want to come back to us, we will support you when you come back if you have something else you want to do. So what happened was the international attention we were able to gain and garner was that translated into interest among private investors. We had a lot of investors who were like, this looks like a really cool project. I'd like to come on board, but I don't want to just throw my money in a Kickstarter. I want revenue. I want to make money off of this,
Right.
And because we already have a line on distribution for the project and a way to complete it, it's a pretty safe bet as an investment. So we've been structuring documents, structuring everything, and we've got investors coming on board, So it's it's very typical for documentaries to be financed during the process. Mm-hmm. And so that's the point. So now that we have some investors, we're just going to keep financing it as we go until we hit the finish line. So that's what we're doing. So we're making the film. We're getting it done. We're making it happen. So I just know people like to hear that story. And there was an individual, you and I both talked about this on one of the Space 1999 pages, who accused us of not being honest about the project and not being transparent. And I feel like we've been tremendously transparent about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the whole goal is, and everything. So I wanted to tell your viewers what's happening and what we're working on and doing. So
no, I appreciate you putting that out there, Jeffrey, and I know everyone is very happy about that. Some of the comments coming, Brian even just said, excellent news. While the Eagle has landed, it's bringing Space 1999 back to the world and to a new generation of new fans worldwide.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Martin, the talking head style doc would not work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it just does not sound exciting to me at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. And now will this product be ready for the convention?
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Okay. So our target right now is to have a rough cut ready by actually we're submitting to the Tribeca Film Festival. We submit on January 17th. So we'll have a rough cut ready by then. I have I was just working with my editor right before this podcast, and we're figuring it all out and getting it all. edit it as we go. That won't be the final edit because there'll be lots of visual effects and different things that have to be added to it, and the score and stuff. But we're going to do a rough cut. We'll have that done by mid-January. Then the final film will be done in May, and then we'll actually debut at that festival, The Goal, in New York in June, mid-June. And then we go through the sales process and everything. And then the plan is that we absolutely will have it available for fans to see it in 24 at the convention. And it should be in international distribution, some sort of a limited theatrical, and then into streaming by 2025. So
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great way to start off the show.
Yeah. No, we're really excited, and we're going. It's going to be awesome, and we're the shoot we're doing with Ed Todd's is going to be epic. We got two motion picture cameras and drones, and it's very similar to shows like we actually are modeling this off of a show on Netflix called Chef's Table. That's the look of what the documentary will be like. So if anybody wants to understand what is this documentary going to look like, watch. Actually, the very first episode of Chef's Table France is one of our influences. Another show is this Searching for Italy with Stanley Tucci. That was a CNN show. That's another show that we're looking at for the look and feel. It's going to be that quality, that good. But then imagine that with visual effects in it. Right. And imagine that with LED volume, with showing. We're going to actually recreate Peary and recreate, the hangar. We're going to actually be able to walk around in the hangar and so we're creating actual 1999 environments from the show, which is going to be really cool. And then on top of that, we're also I'm working with Pinewood Studios to rebuild the Eagle. So we're building the interior of the Eagle. I just had a meeting with them yesterday.
Wow. Okay.
So if all goes well, they should start on it October 23rd, and then it'll be finished and ready for our shoot in early December with Brian Johnson. I'm bringing Brian and Nick over to see that Eagle mock-up, and then and I'm bringing you're going to get to come over and see it, which is going to be cool, which will be fun. And then we'll capture all that, and then we'll see. We're also going to hopefully do some stuff where we get some of the British Eagle fans together with Brian and do a little thing with that too, at Pinewood Studio. So Pinewood's going to be kind of the place where we do everything. But that's pretty epic. That's pretty cool, So yeah.
Wow, that's just everything's just going to be amazing. So yeah, folks, stay tuned for everything, and we'll be broadcasting.
We'll be doing production updates. We're going to have a section called the production log on the eagledocumentary.com, and every time we have a shoot, I'm going to upload photos. We're also going to be doing stuff on Instagram, and you'll be able to track the production of the film the whole time. So next week, I'll post a bunch of photos and everything from the shoot with Todd at Todd's home. So yeah, and then the next round of shooting we're targeting is for late October to go. I'm going to go over and I'll be in Wales with Jamie Anderson, and then I'm going to Northern Ireland to meet with Chris Thompson, who did that wonderful book right behind you. Yeah, and then I'm going to Denmark to see Jan Venneberg.
Wow.
Yeah, and then after that, I stop in London to have a meeting about the construction of the Eagle, and then I'm back in the States. And then we have a pause, and then I go into the next phase of shooting, and that's all going to take place in Alabama and Florida and a couple other places. So yeah,
a lot of moving parts, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So thanks for that update. Much appreciated. And before we jump into Dragon's Domain, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about Space Brain. So I will just bring that up.
You must not touch my brain. It's just one of the best lines ever.
Just sharing the just to remind viewers. I wanted to try to encompass some of the special effects from that episode.
I don't know. Did anybody else try to take shaving cream and I don't know, taking your Eagle and some shaving cream and try to recreate that? I don't know. It's funny because all the foam and all the stuff. Okay, so you and I were talking earlier, and I think we had a great conversation about sort of realism and would this happen? And do you ever wonder what happened to all that foam? That episode, what happened to all it? I know they had the vacuum cleaners out later on.
Yeah.
and everything. But like, that's a lot of foam. Like that shot that you just showed, that's a lot of foam. That's like on the moon covering. Like, where'd that go? I don't know.
I know.
Anyway, I don't know. I'd love to hear theories about what happened to the foam. So, but anyway, the
and it's funny.
foam.
There was an interesting story too, and in fact, Martin Landau had told this story when they were filming the episode, because in main mission that foam just keeps coming in and it gets bigger and bigger. And Charles Crichton was the director, and what was happening is these machines that are actually pumping all this foam in, and the soap and everything is just coming in, and the noise is incredible. Of course, as viewers, we can't hear it. We've got that wonderful music that's playing, and as this is happening, and he was trying to tell them to stop the foam, and he slips and he falls into the foam.
Oh no! Oh no! Stop the foam!
Yeah, exactly. And he said, Martin Landau was telling, he's going, "Stop the foam!
Stop the foam!" Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, what a trippy episode! What a trippy, crazy, just crazy. My gosh, like, how do you even come up with that?
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the stuff that happens in that episode. If you think about all the things that happened to them in the first season of the show, right? And all the, it's insane. It's insane. All the different places they go, things that happen, things that, the people they encounter, stuff like that. So I think Space Brain's definitely notable because it's just, first of all, it's just so visually. Do you remember, I remember another moment of my childhood of being horrified was when, they have that meteor that they bring back inside, and they're scanning it, and then they talk about how heavy it is, and it's the same weight as an eagle, and then it's got the plastics and metals and ceramics and a small amount of human tissue. He says, it was like, I remember as a child, I was like, ew. It was like,
followed by the line, "We found Eagle 1."
Yeah, right. That's right. Yeah, so it was really interesting thought, right? The whole idea behind all of it and how it all, so I don't know, what's your opinion on that episode?
I always thought it was kind of, I don't want to say fun, because the whole situation that was occurring was, very drastic and everything. But the one thing that always stood out in my mind too is, it had such a long beginning teaser too. I think it's probably the longest teaser out of the entire first season of Space 1999, because just the way they introduce everything. There's a lot of promotional material that was out, promotional photos that are from this episode that I was very interested about. And what happens is, when Alan goes out and he gets, when he brings Kelly back in, because Kelly's pretty much, his mind is being taken over by the brain. And then what happens is he gets him back in the Eagle. They cut right to him being in the medical center on Alpha, but there's a whole sequence that was actually taken out where Kelly tries to commandeer the Eagle, and he actually tries to take it into the brain.
Oh,
and what happens is Alan gets a stun gun, and he basically stuns him, and that's how he's able to stop him. But there's, if you go online, do some digging, there's some promotional photos of him like fighting with Kelly, and Kelly's non-responsive. So it's kind of cool. And I came across an early draft script at I think it was at the 2012 Alpha Convention, Space 99 Convention in Burbank. And I was hoping that maybe that was included in there, but it wasn't. And if you ever have the chance to watch the Blu-rays, there's actually commentary that goes along with that, and they make mention of this too. So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it definitely. And I always wondered, poor Kelly. They leave him in there too when when what is it? Koenig says there's a break in medical, and then what's happening is the foam is coming in, and you think,
oh yeah, I remember watching that too. I was like, well,
why is he being sucked out?
He's gonna die. Yeah.
So that always kind of was like, wait a minute, and and then they literally leave him there, and then that's But,
that was a little brutal. That was a little brutal. Yeah, that was weird. That was weird writing. Yeah, it was weird. Yeah.
And there's also there's some edits to this too that took place, and I guess they reworked the script. I thought it was kind of cool seeing those nuclear charges that they compacted on the Eagle. That was kind of cool. And then they were going to send it into the literally into the brain, and then Koenig has to get back on there and he has to defuse them and everything. But yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But they have a lot of nuclear stuff.
Yeah, they really do.
They just really did. They just, they got reactors and waste dumps and bombs that they can, sprinkle between them and, what in collision course and
Hmm.
yeah, it's a lot. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for continuity's sake, this was the last episode that actually featured the Rescue Eagle, and they featured it pretty cool in this too, because but
Cool.
anyway, now getting on to Dragon's Domain, this is what we've been promoting, been talking about. We ended last week with, and wow, I mean, one thing I just want to inject before we really start talking about this. Back in the day, when this show was on Channel 11, I remember, I think you were talking about talking to Captain Phil in regards to remembering what the second episode was of Space 1999 after Breakaway, or maybe having a recollection. I believe Phil said that it was the Guardian of Paris, right? In regards to
Yeah,
that.
in Phoenix, yeah.
In Phoenix.
Yeah.
In New York City, Dragon's Domain was the second episode that they showed. And yeah, and to me, it really kind of made sense too, because I mean, they're referring to going back, about the flashback sequence on Earth and everything, and you're seeing what happened, before the moon was pulling out of the Earth's orbit. I had no idea up until I actually got David Hirsch's technical manual, probably like around 1979, 1980, because one of the first things I did was I went to the back and I'm looking at the episode guide. And I found out that this was the 23rd episode made out of the 24 for first season. And I was like, wow.
That's
and
crazy.
I was blown away because the
Yeah.
production values in this episode were incredible. I mean, everything.
Yeah, they really are. Well, the other thing I really like about this episode is doesn't it feel, one thing, I watched it again last night for the first time in quite a while, and it was interesting to see. There's so many elements of it. Let's talk before we get to the monster and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the production values were high. I love the flashback of seeing Koenig and Victor years earlier, right?
Absolutely.
Seeing Helena years earlier, getting to actually see Earth, right? Again, connecting to our discussion last week about how Commissioner Simmons was such a relevant villain in some ways. This gentleman, the previous panel there, who was the space commissioner, who was talking about how, what does he say? Space exploration it's also very expensive. He talks about how it's expensive, and again, vibing off the realities of what they were dealing with the real space program at the time. So I thought this was just a great scene, and even just the way he hashed it out in front of Tony. Wow, is that dark, And so that was a great scene. But just I remember seeing the Metaprobe interior or the Ultra Probe, the Ultra Probe interior, and the just how cool it was, and everything, and just how well done all the visual effects and everything were, and it felt like a movie. It just felt like so there was one thing, right, where I think part of why it has such an impact when you get to the horror aspects, and how it was because the other aspects were so good,
right.
It was so well made and so well realized and acted and written that it felt like a notch above everything. Everything they always did was excellent, but then this was even more, right? This was even more, and the I don't know. I just thought, and also mixing in the classical piece that's in there.
It was beautiful music.
Yeah, which is really, really cool.
What is Albinoni and G minor?
Albinoni, yeah.
Yeah, and this isn't. And I've said this a lot about certain Space 1999 episodes, and this one really could have been a 2-part episode. I mean, there was so much material in the 52 minutes, and it was given the proper attention where it worked. I mean, nothing was left short. It's one of the scenarios where you could have actually added more. They could have definitely gone a lot further with another hour, and it would have been wonderful if they did. But to your point, especially since this was the second to the last episode, the fact that we got to see Earth, and we got to see exactly what was transpiring, the scenes between Commissioner Dixon, Douglas Wilmer, and Martin Landau and Barry Morse, and then Johnny Garco. I mean, it was it was chilling. I mean, he did not hold back. I mean, he sets it in, and he tries to act like really accommodating at first. He's like, "Oh, sit down, and make yourself comfortable," and then bam, he just goes right for the jugular and does not hold back. And pretty much, like you said, he's berating Tony right out of the gate, and
have your feet on the ground.
Saying, what's your, when he pretty much, Tony Cellini says, you've had my report, and then he's like, yeah, the whole world's had your report. That's my problem.
Right.
So it's he didn't even want to hear him. He dismissed
doesn't even hear him. It's, he's like,
and he wanted to talk to
I love the way Victor's like, well, I mean, he could have, but
right.
Why? But why would he? And everything. And
just handled it. It was so realistic.
Yeah, and that was another thing, right? Too. I remember seeing it too, and these people were heroes to me. Yeah. So then seeing heroes get sort of when the commissioner says, to remind you what it's like to have your feet on the ground, right? I mean, that was like a gut punch to me.
Absolutely.
That was like, wow. I'm like, well, okay. And then not to mention we'd already seen the truth. We knew what really had happened to him. So that was just, it was like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy in this episode. It felt like, that was, so it was some deep stuff. And it really made me think a lot about Space 1999, the impact of the series and what they were actually doing, there. And you and I spoke about that a little bit earlier today, but when you get into the actual monster itself, which obviously by today's standards is, I think, you show that to average people nowadays, they're going to laugh, right? They're because we're living in a world of, Walking Deads and, and all, I mean, horror imagery is very, very graphic now and very, very intense and actually pretty mainstream. Horror is, nowadays in some ways, right? I mean, there were a lot of, if you think about the kind of imagery you see on shows like Game of Thrones, things like that, it's not abnormal to see horrific imagery nowadays. This to be on a syndicated TV show, to have the level of sort of violence and gore that episode had, and it's very unflinching if you think about it, right? The idea, right? That image on the right is. Yep. I didn't even know how to comprehend seeing that as a child.
Yes.
That's the thing, right? It's like I was 8 years old when I saw this. So, and some of our colleagues, we've had many conversations, our team, about this episode and how terrifying it was to us as children. And I think there was just something about being pulled in. God, it would have been bad enough to see them pulled in.
Right.
If they were just pulled in, we would have been like, but then that comes out, this carcass, this burning, desiccated carcass comes out, right? It's like, what the heck, it was I don't know about you, but like I was just flabbergasted. I didn't even know what to think. It'd be interesting. I wish I could, because I know my parents like weren't into the show, but they were like very happy to let me watch it. So they would kind of be sitting there reading the paper,
right.
or reading a magazine or whatever it was, and Space 1999's on, and then my sister and I are just on the floor in our family room, glued to the TV set, from the first moment to the last moment, right? And I just have to wonder, like, what did my parents think when they hear this? That was, another thing I was thinking about last night was another part that made it so terrifying was the sort of screams of the monster.
Yes.
Right. I mean, the sound design of the monster was actually quite terrifying just in and of itself. Right. Mm-hmm. So I just imagine my mother peeking around her newspaper, like, what are my kids watching? It's just, and then of course, my sister and I, we probably talked about that for a week, after that, and I think I told you, we called it the car wash monster, because of the tendrils and
It's funny because my recollections too is, I mean, when I first saw this, I remember like hiding my eyes, and then I think my mom was like in the kitchen and my dad, was in the other room, and I'm like going on the side of the television because I was afraid to watch it because, I was like 9 or 10 years old. I think it was like 9 years old when this was out.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, and I had my tape recorder going too, because I recorded these episodes. I'd listened to them endlessly, over and over again. But the funny thing is, I've been posting about, we were going to be discussing this on, with the show, and the majority of the comments that come through from folks that are in our age range, it's all the same. How as a, a younger person, or, watching this, in their youth or what have you, terrified them, and, made, they never recovered from like watching it, or it just had some everlasting impression where they remember watching it for the very first time. So we're all in this kind of group where we
Mhm.
were affected by this. And, you know, if you think about it, like in terms of today, what's out in the movies and what have you, by, you know, today's standards, if somebody, you know, watches it, that, you know, like you said earlier, it's like, okay, this is really nothing. But this was huge. And the cuts, the angles, the editing,
Mhm.
the darkness, the mist that's coming through. I mean, it just lent to the realism of the scene, and it was horrific. It was terrifying, and
Mhm.
it holds up today. I can watch this over and over again. And in fact, you know, we were talking about it, you know, a little bit last night, and you know, you were saying that, you know, your wife had never seen this episode
No.
before.
Mm-mm.
So let me ask you, what was her feeling about it? Did she enjoy it, or?
She found it interesting. That was the thing she said, and I think for her, it was more of like a snapshot into the culture of the time, and just,
Sure.
and just seeing how it was done and how it was put together and everything was fascinating to her, and
Mhm.
everything. I think that was where it didn't scare her, but
Right.
but she found it interesting. That was a term she said. It was really interesting to her. It held her attention. I will say that it really held her attention, and um, and yeah, so for sure, for sure. I think she thought Tony's story was interesting, and the one thing that I didn't like about the episode, so many things I loved about it. And we've talked
Mhm.
about some of those, but the one thing I didn't like was the actual end. There's something tonally that's off.
Mm.
Um, Tony's dead,
Yeah.
and Tony's his friend. Tony was his
Right.
longtime friend who he advocated for and all these feelings. And for them to have sort of that 70s kicker cutesy moment almost, you know what I mean? When I say that, it just really didn't dishonored Tony to me, the way that and that's writing and direction, not the actors or anything. It's the
Sure.
writing and direction. That final scene, to me, should have been, like, um
More powerful.
more powerful and much more about the fact that not, Tony would be very happy to have a mythology. It's like, Tony got digested inside the
Right. I
this,
get
this this huge alien thing. Tony had died a horrific, painful death after
Mhm.
being, floating through space for months, and then coming back and losing his, and you know what I mean. It's like
Yeah, he
Tony
was
Tony had a
chastised, right? He was ridiculed. I mean, he barely survived.
yeah
No, to your point, he barely survived. He got away.
yeah
He saw three members of his crew get killed. There was a I liked, I mean, there seemed to be a what's the word I'm looking for? A foreshadowing or a hint that potentially there was some kind of interest with the medical officer that was on the ship, because Dr. Monique Fauchier, because you know he's talking to, obviously, you know, he's talking to his crew, but when he goes past her, she's like in the reclining area, and then he
mhm.
puts his hand on her, and there's like a smile, and then
Well,
he
I mean,
continues.
I don't know about you, but when I didn't think anything of it as a child, but watching it last night, I was like, wait a minute, there's got two dudes and two women. I was like, hmm. I was like, that sounds like a fun mission. Okay, they probably, I was like, I watched that last night. I was thinking, okay, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
right.
yeah. Now, of course, we
So
had old Admiral Ozzel in there from Empire Strikes
yes,
Back. Yes,
absolutely,
yes,
Michael Schur.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, getting back to it, Tony's had a tremendously tragic trajectory to his life, and to go out there and, man, the thing is also, I would have loved for him to actually have killed the thing. I wish he had killed it. And that, again, the stories that sadly, the stories that Nick Tate told us about the fact that sort of, Martin Landau kind of grabbed the script and grabbed it and said, hey, I'm the hero. I gotta be the one that vanquishes this thing. Because I mean, Tony's even his plan of wrapping himself up with the rope. And
Right.
that was one of the things that scared me as a child too. Was the thing was smart enough to destroy the rope and choke him and pull him, but then Tony's like, no, man, I'm stabbing. I got a knife. I'm gonna, you're out. You're done.
And
And
you're like, you're thinking, and I mean, I was like, hit him in the eye, go for the
hit him in
monster's
it. Yeah,
eye. It's
get him,
like,
right, and
yeah,
everything. So it's
exactly.
like I actually really would have been completely satisfied. It actually would have been a better ending if Tony had actually prevailed. I think
Yeah,
I would have liked to have seen him survive. But anyway, if you're going to kill him, you don't go, hey, I think Tony would have liked being him. It just was like that was so tonally off, the ending to me. It should have been much more of a. I'm not sure how I would have written it myself as a writer, but I think you could have given it a very, very, a sad sort of, I think the wrap up would have been, Helena should have said, "I feel really bad because he was telling us the truth the whole time."
Well,
You know?
to your point on that, the
Yeah.
one thing that was at least satisfying to me, just a little, which I wanted more like you did, is that after the monster's been killed and they're like they're getting their breaths and they're just kind of like standing there and they're looking, the camera, they look
The camera
down,
pans across the carnage
right,
and
and then
says,
you see all the skeletons, the
this is all
remains.
it was all true. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
it pans back to both Koenig and Helena, and she's just like shaking her head, like, how could this have happened? How could this be
Right.
reality? And
Mhm.
that was almost like the vindication that, okay, you know what, he was telling the truth. All of this actually meant something. That, you know what, he wasn't crazy. He had a reason for all this. And if there was any vindication in regards to Tony happening, to me, it was captured in that single moment, because
Mhm.
you can see it. But
Mhm.
to your point, then it's almost like the justification. She's doing the narrative. The monster was more than any of us could believe, and it's like true. And but then it's like it kind of falls flat, like you said, when they get
Yeah,
back and
because he was telling you the truth, and
yeah,
this guy suffered. He suffered the dishonor, on top of actual suffering of seeing his crewmates die, as you said, and then surviving in space for months. So what I mean. So just that was weird. That was kind of a weird writing thing, but hey, we're here to talk about it. So I feel like it's cool to talk about
oh, absolutely.
all aspects of it, because there's so many things I would speak positively of, so.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments are coming through about just about this. Let me see. I'm just going to pull one up. Andrew said my kids were and grandkids are still scared of the scene. Yeah.
I get that. Yeah.
Yep. Brennan said there was a creature in old Hercules movie that was like that. I forgot the name though. Oh, Hydra. Yep. Colin just said.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, thanks for joining. I know you're joining us from the UK as well. Alan Russell is also joining us from the UK. He said, I don't recall seeing it edited on ITV here in the UK when it reviewed it originally. Oddly, though, for the 80s repeat showing on LWT, they missed showing the episode in the first season, but they repeated it and ran it later, I guess. He also commented that said, though, they oddly then repeated about 5 episodes in the middle of series 2 repeats. So I'm not sure if it was omitted intentionally or by mistake. Jerry, welcome to the show. He's saying aliens anonymous. And then Martin saying the monster was reminiscent of the octopus attack in 20,000.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just it's interesting to hear the different comments and commentary that everybody has in regards to this episode. Bill saying every space.
Yeah, I thought that too, Bill. I was like, why do they have a hatchet in a? Okay, sure, all right, yeah, just right there. I just like because I'm sure they had those like on the lunar module, for example. I'm sure they had a hatchet, just hanging out, and everything. Like, let's watch that. I was like, that was really convenient to have a hatchet. It's like okay, so
speaking about that, that's one of the things. One of my nitpicks about this is that it's the command module that separates from the rest of the Eagle. So that portion of the Eagle, when he docks the ultra probe into the command module actually docks with the ultra probe at the end when he goes back. When the doors open and he goes in, he should theoretically just be in the ultra probe. It should not that section.
No, you wouldn't have had that middle section. No, you wouldn't have that.
But of course they did that just for what we were just talking about in regards to the survival gear. I think it was labeled as, and that's the only time you ever see that in an episode. So it's kind of like a writer's license with that.
Right.
Scott is joining us. Scott, welcome. He's saying the probe ship was an excellent example of 70s style interstellar craft. As a kid, I easily imagined ships like that in our future.
I think the thing that I loved about it was the fact that it was so reminiscent of the Eagle. That was the part that I thought was so neat about that as a child. It's like this sort of design repetition, that these elements, right? The command module of it, it's like, oh, that looks like an Eagle, but like this is like a souped up Eagle that that's got all these fuel tanks and stuff. It just was really neat to see the same design pulled in to the same design elements in this. Even the girders and the tank, it was very obviously built by the same people with the same aesthetic and technical charge to it. So that was something that was super cool about this, and I love that ship. What a great design! I need one of those.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. It is amazingly, it's just beautiful.
I'll have to
Hey,
talk to Phil.
Chris Trice is out there. Chris, welcome. And he's saying kids actually enjoy being scared as long as it doesn't traumatize.
Yeah, this past that, at least for me, and for pretty much, I know no kids, nobody who was a kid who saw that didn't feel traumatized. That there may have been kids who were like, that was awesome. Everyone I knew was like, that messed me up. It's like I mean, well, remember we should tell them about what Ron, right, who works with us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was rewatching the series and he's like, he's 56 years old, and he's like, I skipped it. I couldn't watch it again. That was just in the last month or two. He's like, I couldn't watch it again. I think that it was pretty scary, So, but yes, I'm assuming there might be some kids who enjoyed it from a fear factor. I didn't. It scared the crap out of me. I was just like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's interesting though. I remember when I would come around in reruns, I would like make myself sit through it because I like so many of the other parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It
but
does.
I was scared to watch it again. I remember every time it would come on again, I'd have this like feeling of like dread, like, oh my gosh, it's Dragons Dwayne. Am I going to be able to do this?
To get past that one point where what happens on the Ultra Probe ship, and then go to the next section and just be beyond it, because it was an enjoyment of the episode, but it's just going through that whole thing, seeing that happen to him. And the other thing is, when you're watching that, you're almost like hoping, like at least one of them is going to survive it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Okay, let's talk about it. Here's why I think it's so traumatic. Okay, so first off, it's like we dock with this ship. There are all these ships out here, so there's a psychological impact of, we've got a graveyard of ships. What the heck is this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so that's a lot of folks that this thing ate.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So it's and obviously it has a taste for whatever alien species it gets. Right. It's got all these. Okay. So all these ships are there. We don't know that yet, but we see all these ships. That's kind of weird and creepy to begin with. Then on top of it, we dock with this ship, and then this light and all this stuff comes in, and they're like, whoa. Okay. It's kind of, and like he says, it's pretty weird. Right. Mm-hmm. And then this thing appears. And it appears, and just in and of itself, the idea of this sort of tentacled monster appearing with it screams, that's crazy. But then it now gets into your head and makes you walk over to it.
Right.
Right. Okay. Right. Then it pulls you in, and then it eats you, and then spits out your remains, right? So you think about it, it's just like amp up after amp up. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Is that, you see what I'm saying, right?
It's a nasty progression for sure.
It's a progression, exactly. And I think it was almost James Cameron-like, it's in terms of its, how it progresses. So I think that's part of why it was so traumatic. It may not have been as bad if it'd been just, it's a monster and it grabs you. It's like, okay, it's a monster, right?
Right, because then you're going to try to fight it off. But this thing, like you said, I mean, it invaded the ship. Then there's the suction. It's the wind. It's not only horrific looking. There's the sounds that it's giving off, but also the wind. They're being pulled in. They're trying to hold on for dear life, and then their brain is pretty much being said, go towards the light. And it just gets worse and worse with each stage of what's happening.
And then even have the brilliant setup in the teaser of him being in bed, and then suddenly that the spinning lights of the organism reaching out to him, right? And he's fighting. I mean, that's terrifying in itself. It's like, what was that? And then we get to find out. So I mean, this is a real psychological roller coaster with this episode.
What would have really been interesting too is actually this leads into a question. Did you feel that the dragon, the monster, was mobile, that it was able to move throughout the Ultra Probe? And the reason why I'm asking this is because essentially what it does is it tries to bring everybody closer and suck them in. However, at the one point when he's trying to escape and he's trying to get into the command module of the Ultra Probe, as he's trying to close the doors, the tentacles are like enclosing in on the door, and it's actually trying to force open the door, you
Mhm.
actually see the light right there.
Mm.
So did you feel that when that was occurring, that the monster actually had been mobile and moved up the
No,
dragon?
I didn't take it that way. I think something. I think part of what this, it's almost like it's interesting. It'd be interesting to kind of talk to the right. If we could have talked to the writer to go like, what were you thinking? Like what was the goal here? Because because I almost felt like it's almost like they docked at the last ship, right?
Yep.
So the question is, did it? Yeah, it's really interesting. Did it sort of transport itself from ship to ship somehow, or did or was it like in one ship and then that ship it docked and then
Yeah.
it I don't know, I don't even know how it worked. How did it? And then the other question, the great question, is how the heck did those ships end up light years away? Like what grabbed the ships and moved them light years away, and how did it?
Right. I
I
mean,
don't know. That's kind of a
you think
space
about
1999ism, though. Stuff just
sure,
happens.
because
So
they went through the black sun, they went through space warps. I mean,
yeah,
they've gone through a whole. So
yeah.
I
How
guess
did
that's
those ships from
how did they.
Ultra end up way out there?
So that's where it's really the metaphysical behind aspect of the
Hmm.
series really comes in. So it's more, I don't want to say spiritual because there was nothing spiritual about the dragon, but
Hmm. Hmm.
but metaphysical, maybe demon like in that sense that there was a consciousness that was maybe like into the occult or something, whatever, but something that was on a different realm, a
Hmm.
different dimension, and maybe that's where you really could have a field day with this. I mean, the way it's left open is it's like, okay, and they even question it. There are these ships on the screen, and it's very similar to what he saw at Ultra. And right away, he tells Sandra, look for the Ultra Pro, because if
Right.
anything, that's going to be the decider if this is what that is. And then
Hmm.
when they find out, it's never explained, which some things are better left unexplained because
Hey, maybe. Okay, so try it this way. I'm just playing around with this, but maybe the idea is that it's taking. Okay, so it's kind of got a hive or something. It's web,
hmm,
right? And it lives within the web, and the ships are all attached to the web. But then what it does is maybe it has the power and ability to grab that whole web and transport it out to another spot in space somewhere,
yeah,
right? And then it's almost like the web is the attractor, right? The web of all these ships, it's like it lets the ships be there in the whole thing, because then people go, hey, what are all these ships? And
right.
then when you go and dock at one of the ships, it kind of morphs itself over to wherever you docked, right? And then gets you. I guess that's the thing, right? I don't know why it couldn't, like go straight into your ship, but maybe it's the ships are embedded in the web now, and so just like again, it was on the meta probe, right? So that's kind of an interesting thought. I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine like a theme for that, how this thing could be working.
No, and you can go in so many different directions with
Yeah.
this, and as far as how that went. And interesting enough, the original, and this was in Bob David Hirsch and Bob Wood's book that they did. They talked about it. The original concept, the original story for this was called The Web. So
Oh, okay.
interesting enough. But
Interesting. Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
So and even Koenig even makes reference, when he's trying to, when they're in the Eagle and he's saying to Bergman, he's like, he goes beyond the obvious explanation. I can't be much help. And then he says, be obvious, then what is it? And then he says they look like flies that are caught in a spider's web.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
that's when Koenig says that brings us back to monsters, and it's
Right.
just it all connects that way. Now, here's another thing too, and we're dissecting this, and I'm just throwing it out there. It's just a point to put out. If this monster was invading the ship when a ship would dock, theoretically, when the Eagle docked with the Ultra probe,
It should have
and
appeared in the Eagle.
it could have appeared in the Eagle,
Yeah.
or exactly now, or
Well, remember what happened though? Okay, so when they first docked, the lights came. That was it. It jumped into their ship. That's it. That was it. Remember the lights that come
yeah,
in? That's it arriving.
right,
So it didn't. It. So what could have happened is so Tony docked, and by the time he docked, yeah, it makes sense. It holds up, because what would have happened is if the Eagle had docked to the meta probe and those lights had come in, then the monster would have been in the Eagle.
Right.
That's it. So the monster's jumping around between the ships. That's got to be what it's doing. That's what it's doing. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, fascinating. I mean, it's a really interesting idea and very well made. And it was um and traumatic for most of us. So put it that way.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you describe yourself as covering your eyes and trying to hide behind the TV, it's like,
True story. I did it.
yeah, no, I believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
Chris, let me see here. I'm just seeing a lot of people are throwing a lot of comments out here.
Sure.
Bill said, like a spider's web full of dead critters. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chris said the irony is that although it really stretches the boundaries of horror on TV, it remains a fan favorite and rated roughly equally with Breakaway.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's no question, Chris. I'm not putting it down. We're talking about it because it's one of our favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite episodes, and I love it. I think it's a great episode. I'm just not going to downplay the trauma it caused to so many of us. That's all. Yeah, but it's absolutely a huge one. Yeah.
Shari said, I didn't see this as a child, but can relate to the fear. The Blob scared me to death and still does to this day. I saw Dragon's Domain first time with Roy in my late 40s, and it has still scared me as an adult. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I play it, she always says, uh-oh, that's the one with the monster. I know that music, and I know that sound. Yeah, Brendan saying I wouldn't watch The Blob as a kid either. Yeah.
No, I saw that as a child, and I thought it was really scary. What scared me as a kid was, have you ever watched any of the Quatermass movies, like the Quatermass in the pit or whatever?
I actually didn't see those movies. I actually was introduced, again, talking about David Hirsch, because we talked about it on the show. I only saw the original series. It was like almost like a mini series that was in black and white, and it wasn't even the full episodes. But
okay,
that movie you're referring to, the pit, was it the Quatermass and the Pendulum, or the Pit and the Pendulum?
Well, there's one. Let's see. Is that also known as, what's the one that's like 50 million years to Earth or something like that? Is that it's the one with the Martians in it?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that.
And that episode, that movie with the Martians, really, that was very scary to me as a child, seeing that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how, these movies or TV episodes, they have lasting impressions. And I mean, we can talk
about yeah. And there's no part of me saying that this was bad. I think it was 5 million years to Earth. Yeah. The that's it. That's the one. We're talking about the same one. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's the movie. That was pretty scary to me as a kid. But again, it just because it was scary doesn't mean we're saying it was bad. It's fantastic. Right. It's great. Yeah. Yep.
And Carrie, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show. Good, nice to have you out there. Yeah, it's always so much fun to look at what folks are saying. Claudia's saying, so back when the moon was still in orbit, the Eagles were equipped with basic emergency gear in case of a crash on Earth, cold weather.
Or, you have to chop some wood.
Yeah.
Emergency wood chopping,
you just never know.
You just never know. You just never know.
Hey, Liz is joining us from the UK as well, too. Liz, thanks for being out there. She said, well, most aircraft carry at least one axe, so it's maybe a carryover from that.
Yeah.
But
I think, what it is just how, like, it wasn't like it was in a kit and we had to dig around for it. It was like, it was just right there. I think that's what it is. That was for me. It's like, of all the things we might need on the ship, we better have an axe. You know what I mean? That's all it was. I could see having one, especially if they were going to do a landing on the planet or something like that. Right. But it was just like the thing that was right there, Yeah.
It was the go-to.
Yeah. It was the go-to.
Whoops. Sue said, hey, Sue, she said, I am not a horror movie fan, but the movie that scared the living daylights out of me was Kingdom of the Spiders. I felt like I had to watch it because William Shatner was in it. I kept turning the TV off and turning it back on because I couldn't miss Captain Kirk.
I remember that being a scary movie as well.
And John's out there. John, welcome. He's saying, I later thought of it as not as dissimilar to the original It by Stephen King. In a way, the dragon was physical manifestation of a physical being. And Scott is commenting, saying,
oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm going to actually say that I think, I actually think that Force of Life is the scariest episode. You're right. Like, this is the most traumatic one, but if you think about the overall, right, there's a roller coaster going on in this, right? Where you get to have some moments where we talk about the science, or we talk about we're on Earth, we have conversations, right? It goes up and down and up and down. There's all kinds of stuff. Whereas Force of Life, it's like it starts and it just gets darker and darker and darker. Like the whole episode is
right
one
to the
big,
end.
yeah. It just yeah. So that I think that's the scariest episode of Space 1999 is probably Force of Life. You know, for me, I would say that's the scariest overall. You know, what a great episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one of
So
my
well
favorites.
directed. So well directed. Yeah.
The photography, everything. Yeah. Yeah, and also Jeff will saying the Troubled Spirit.
Yeah.
That was
yeah. Troubled Spirit was definitely spooky. It doesn't. It's the reason why I don't think we either of us counted Troubled Spirit in our favorites, because I don't know. It feels uneven to me from a storytelling, right? You know what I mean? I don't quite get what was going on. I don't know. You know, it's everything, but like it's scary and it's stuff. But you know what? It felt like it was trying to be scary. Does that make sense? Whereas like Force of Life
was scary.
it was really truly a scary, right? It wasn't like trying to be. This was in its core, in its soul of the story, was a terrifying concept that just kept getting worse and worse and escalating and that sort of thing, right? Whereas it felt like Troubled Spirit's like, let's do a scary episode. You know what I mean? Whereas, you know what I mean? Yeah.
You didn't know where Troubled Spirit was going, because it was, I mean, you knew that there was a spirit, or there was some kind of force of energy, but you really didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I didn't know where it was going. I completely agree. Yeah, I didn't know where it was going.
Life, you saw what happened. You saw Zarf get, affected by that energy, and then you saw how he was reacting, and then you knew it wasn't good. And it just paved the way.
And also as a sympathetic villain, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
oh my God, yeah.
Right? You know, think about that, because like whereas we have a sympathetic character in Tony Cellini who is but yes, oh, me too, Carrie, absolutely, very scary. Yeah. That was a super scary aspect of that episode. But it was it's so interesting. Again, it's like when you think about, I don't know about you, but I don't think the core audience of that show, let's just talk about this for a second.
Sure.
Was the core audience of Space 1999 grown-ups at the time?
I would say probably not.
I would say probably not. Like I don't meet people who are like right now in their 70s, for example, who were like, yeah, I love that show. I watched it. You know what I mean? Like I was really into that. It's like when you think about the people who are kind of keeping the flame alive and really into this, it's all people. Yeah, it's our age. It's our age and maybe a little older, whatever, right? But it's like, I would say the range is kind of like 55 to 65 or something, right? So then if you think about that, you de-age by 50 years.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So it's very interesting that the core audience for this show kind of turned out to be younger. And then you have all these themes and this stuff. Now, I don't know that the producers weren't obviously making it for kids.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Of course not. But it's just, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I just find that fascinating.
No, it's an interesting point. And if I remember correctly, I mean, one of the things I used to hear was that Space 1999, and Brian, you're out there, Liz, you're out there, maybe Chris, you're out there as well, from the UK, you can attest to this. I've heard that 1999 was shown, I think, on, wasn't it Saturday mornings? Wasn't it relegated to that? Or was it, correct me if I'm wrong, was it initially in prime time when it was broadcast? I've heard so many stories where it was shifted over. Now, I'm not sure if that's one after being syndicated. I can say here in the States, at least for Channel 11, a couple of years after the show, stopped production, I think around 78, 79, they were running it on Saturday mornings, like at 11 o'clock or so. And I was ecstatic because I was just happy to catch it, because they weren't running it very often. And it was like right after Doctor Who, which was being shown on Saturday mornings. They'd run 4 episodes back to back. So I don't know. I'm very curious, if anybody can comment on that, and especially in the UK, in regards to the audiences. I mean, you were 8, I was 9. We were in that age range. In fact, Brian said year one was just the best episodes, well acted. I was 14. So yeah, but anyway, let me see if any comments are coming through. Carrie saying in Los Angeles, I believe it aired at 7 p.m. on Saturdays. Yeah, it was 7 p.m. on Saturdays for here as well. Chris is saying initially 5 p.m. on a Saturday, but later Sunday lunchtimes. Okay. So Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting point though, Jeffrey, because
Hmm, hmm.
you would think it would be more of it would be somewhat of an adult audience. Now, what I will say is the earliest Space 1999 convention that was in 78, I believe that there were folks there that were probably like maybe in, in their 20s,
Hmm.
but also there were teenagers there, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
younger
No,
adult.
no, that makes sense. I'm not. I'm certainly. Please believe me. I'm not trying to say that there weren't older people who watched it. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm
But as a
saying that it
core
seems like.
audience, you mean?
What was that?
You mean more of like a core audience
Yeah,
though,
I'm
right?
saying the core audience that seemed to get into it seemed to be younger. I think
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I think that's really, really fascinating. And I wonder. So 5 p.m. on Saturday, and then and I think I told you in Arizona when I was a kid, we watched. It was at 6 p.m. on Saturday night. So it was right before. It was right after the news and right before the primetime Saturday night shows. That's when it would come on. So.
Yeah, and again, the same for here. They were doing it, I think, on out of New York City. It was on a Sunday night at 7, and then what they did after maybe a couple months, they switched it over to Saturday nights. So it really wasn't in the later time slot. It was in more of a family type of time
Yeah.
slot, for
No, and
younger.
it's just really interesting. It's like because gosh, I wish I could. I really wish I could talk to Jerry Anderson about it and find out like what some of the horror aspects of the show and some of the more adult. It's interesting because the adult aspects, like with many things, right? It seems like there's culturally we're more tolerant of adult of horror and gore imagery type stuff sometimes than we are of things like sexuality and stuff, right? So it's like, right? I mean, because there's no way they could have gotten away with a show that was equivalently trying to be adult in that way, at
Right.
the time. There's no way. But I just wonder, like the censors, what was the, what were censors concerned about this, or like, was there
Well,
any ratings?
to your point, I think in
Yeah.
certain areas, this episode may have been censored. I
Mhm.
believe. I think I've heard some people, comment about that. I don't know exactly.
Well, there's no that's what all I'm trying to say is I think we as a culture, I think we've gotten very desensitized to violence and gore. I just think I think we absolutely have. And I think that desensitization, things seem normal to us. That try to imagine this. Like sometimes I think about the stuff that's like in shows like The Walking Dead right now. If you took that and showed that what is on just cable television that any child could watch, this horrific imagery, if you took that and showed that to a person from the 1950s or 40s,
Get it.
it would probably mentally, they'd be mentally damaged by it. I mean, that's something that I really find fascinating. Things that are completely normal to us that are being shown. I mean, think about like how much violence in movie trailers has gotten more and more and more graphic as time goes on, right?
You just reminded me of something because and this would have been probably in the 1970s, and I remember that there was some kind of newspaper article or some type of write-up talking about the violence in Saturday morning cartoons for children. And
Yes,
one of the
yes.
one of the cartoons, I think, was like the Pink Panther. They were saying
Oh,
how
well, Tom and Jerry was one of the ones that they
yeah,
talked about a lot at the time.
the
Yeah,
Road
you're
Runner
right.
and
No, it was a Roadrunner
right,
was considered really, really violent and controversial. Obviously, the most probably the most violent show that really got considered that had a lot of trouble was Johnny Quest. Actually,
really,
at the time, yeah, Johnny Quest was something that was considered very questionable in terms of the level of violence, and there were a lot of guns, and the kids had guns at times, and there was all kind. You know what I mean? That
right.
they were pushing the envelope. That was a new thing what they did with Johnny Quest when that came out. Uh, but I guess you're absolutely right. It's like if you think about I think culturally there was more concern back then. I don't think that exists now the same. So I think it's one thing to have peril
Hmm.
and to have you know what I mean, like to have perilous situations where people are in danger and there's fear based on that versus gore, right?
Yeah.
Because when you think about some of these shows now, they're just going for gore. It's
Oh
about
yeah.
that, right?
Oh,
Right. It's just about how can we gross you out, and sometimes it isn't even about genuine fear or psychological terror. It's just gore, right? Um, and it's interesting though because these episodes of Space 1999 kind of had both. They
mm,
had psychological terror, but they did have an aspect of gore to them that I don't know that there were average TV shows showing like Cabot Rowling. I don't know what they even described that as, But if I think about it, there were quite a few images in the course of Space 1999 that were very, very, troubling for me as a child to see, and everything. So it's interesting, and I'm not trying to say, oh, I was this big sensitive kid. That's not it. It's just when you have a sense of empathy and you care about people and you care about you go, well, that would hurt. that would be bad. It's like you know what I mean? That's all I think it is.
No, it's interesting too, because really, you can have the psychological terror can be more horrific than actually seeing it, because I mean, it implies what is going to happen. And when you see the monster and what it's going to do, and that it's not going to be good, and it's pulling them in, that these people are not going to make it. I mean, it's pretty much you see the end result when it actually, for that moment when Darwin King comes out, and and I remember my one friend, he kind of, and this is back in the 70s, he kind of like, trying to make it light. He said, okay, well, he went in, face down, and then he came out, head facing up, just as, to make a light moment out of it, to kind of like, break it up. But the fact is, I mean, he's totally burned, and you can actually see like his teeth, his jawline.
Oh yeah. No, you're seeing his rib cage. You're seeing him, and the bottom half of his body is basically gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, so I was just thinking about it as a child, you process that. It's like, what just, oh my God, like I'd never seen anything like that. Right. It was just, that was,
it was very quick. It was like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. And it was over. So I just find it fascinating. That's all.
It's definitely, Andrew, and we discussed this last week too, Andrew, about the gore was edited out of End of Eternity when Koenig was being beaten up with the plane. Airplane. Yeah. I mean, that whole sequence.
Which actually is the most traumatic thing for me watching Space 1999 was that moment. I remember I had nightmares about that scene with the airplane. So, yeah.
It's funny. I'll share this, and it's something that I haven't thought about in a long time. It makes no sense. It's when you have these crazy dreams. I remember, and it was in the late 70s, and I was dreaming about Space 1999, and it's crazy, but it was taking place in an Eagle, and it was centered around the Bringers of Wonder. And I remember waking up in a nightmare from this thing. And what happened was Tony Videshi is fighting with the quote unquote the Bringers of Wonder. And what they do is they turn him into one of them. Ooh. And then they push him out the airlock.
Oh gosh.
I woke up and I was like, what the hell just happened? I was it was almost like and I never forgot that. And I've actually never talked about that.
Yeah.
But
I get it.
That stuck in my mind, and I was just like, I was just like horrified by it. And
yeah. Well, I remember Bringers of Wonder. That was of season 2. That's what stood out the most for me, was that with that 2-parter, right? And it was just that moment where Coney's like, get it out of here. Yeah. His that was scary. It was I mean, those things were so gross. And the slime around the eyeball. They really like the single eyeball tentacle creatures, So it was so that was, it was good. It was good though. It was good stuff though. It was good stuff.
Yeah. And it's funny that you reminded me of that though.
Yeah. And by the way, I think, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. No, I've kind of, I'm just thinking about this whole thing.
Yeah, the missing link. That's, that's true. And you know what? I'll just comment, and then we'll jump real quick, because I know we're up against the clock. In regards to missing link, Koenig is having that conversation with Vana about everything about, or Vana is having, they're discussing about, testing and how, he's a human being and everything. And then they talk about experimenting with, humans like they did on Earth. And then what happens is it's like they reach into his mind, and then he's hallucinating. He's seeing these things that look like something out of like, Dr. Frankenstein with, where the guy has his brain exposed.
Oh yeah, that's right. That was,
that was,
I mean, it's like, there's a lot of horror going on in the show. It really does. Yeah. It's gosh, I was just thinking of another one. Gosh darn it, I'm terrible. The episode with Joan Collins.
Mission to the Darians.
Mission to the Darians.
Yeah.
Mission to the Darians. I remember just the whole concept. That was one where it was psychologically scary.
Yeah.
Of what they were doing. And and just the idea that, like, if you're flawed, we just get to use you. We just get to use you as that was this guy's finger is not you don't yeah, that whole thing with that was pretty
and
scary to me.
Yeah, because he's screaming for help for Dr. Russell to help him, and the whole thing. That's another brilliant example.
Yeah.
Chris commented, Trek 6 had pink blood to get a lower rating. You can have as much alien goo as you like as long as it doesn't resemble blood. Yeah.
That's true. The Pepto-Bismol blood. Yes. Yeah.
Jerry has one comment. He said, I remember even watching horror slasher movies from the 70s, and they're not nearly as gory as I remember. My mind and imagination filled all that in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Just real quick, I'm just going to throw a couple slides up from this, but just a brilliant episode. I mean, there's so much to it, so much to remember. I mean, the talking about model effects, special visual effects. I'm just going to go through the slides. I mean, obviously there's the dragon. We were talking about, earlier, and then also referencing loving the aspects of being back on Earth.
One thing was interesting. One thing I said to my wife, because what was it? 3 weeks ago, I had lunch with Barbara Bain, right? Mm-hmm. And this version of her character was the closest to Barbara that I felt. The warmth and the energy and how she carried herself in this scene, the way she came in and how that's Barbara. To me, it felt like Barbara much more than Dr. Russell typically is. Dr. Russell's not really Barbara. Right. But this when she was here, that felt more like Barbara. It was very interesting.
Oh, yeah. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Now that painting in the background, I'm
is that a Keith Wilson?
I'm beginning to wonder if it is, because it really
I was going to ask you about that. When I was watching it last night, I was like, that looks like a Keith Wilson illustration.
It does. Yeah. And I'm going to try to find out about that, because it really, really does.
I love their jackets there too.
Yeah. And it's almost like that could have been the inspiration for the second season when they were using them earlier in the second season. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that this is the one time we get to see an Eagle separate from on the launching pad where the passenger module is set, and then also it descends. I mean, it's just brilliant visuals with that. And then, of course, this is the only episode we actually see the command module in use, actually separating and then docking. I thought that was just so cool. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we never see a shot of the Eagle like that. And
right.
Yeah. But
hey, were there any ships from any other episodes in there? I think there were, right? There were like some of the other, isn't a bomber the alien bomber from War Games? Isn't that one of the ships that's floating there?
I think so. And then the Dragon ship was actually in the Metamorph when in the ship, the graveyard.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and again, I really hope that I don't want to ever come across as being judgmental about the violence or gore or horror. I mean, they have to make the show they wanted to make. I think the only issue is that there was a show here that I never struggled with the adult aspects of the way the characters interacted, the things they talked about, the science of it, the conversations, you know what I mean? That stuff was all totally cool. I felt like I was there. I got it. The ships were awesome, all that stuff. But it was just these aspects were something that I, as a young child, had just never encountered. Thank goodness. It's not something you would want to hopefully encounter as a child with too much of it. So
no.
Yeah.
Chris said Sidon ship is there and is one of the nuclear mines is there. So
okay.
Thanks for pointing it out. Yes, and Chris also said, thanks for reminding me, Chris. That was M's office from the James Bond movies.
Okay.
But I'm still wondering about that painting, though. I think that it might be. Christian is joining us from Canada. Welcome, Christian.
Hi, Christian.
Yeah, out there. Real quick, though, if we just touch upon, because this was the second to last episode, and I just thought it would just be appropriate since we went through the top 10, just really quickly, just to give a mention to Testament of Arcadia, because this, in fact, is definitely is a favorite. It's really tough when you're trying to do a top 10 list, because with Space 1999, there were so many incredible episodes, so many good ones. And this, to me, was just about there. And it essentially wraps up the first season, which if there was going to be an ending, it kind of pardon the expression, or pardon the term, it does bring everything full circle, so to speak, in regards to everything. And I just thought it was worth mentioning. Now, in terms of this episode, Jeffrey, were you is this probably like on your second, list of top 10, would you say, or top 5?
I would put it on my, so we went through my top 10, right? So
Yeah.
I'd put this into the
next batch.
The next batch. Yeah, this would go in the next batch. It's definitely not one of the episodes I dislike of the show by any means. It's a good episode. It's a fine episode. I think it's interesting. I didn't see this one during the first run for some reason. I don't know what happened. For some reason, I never saw this again. I saw this in the 90s, the first time I saw it. So I encountered it later, and then I was kind of like, huh. It was really interesting to me, because it was like, okay, so is this trying to explain why all these things happen to them? Right? So having not seen that, it was a very interesting experience for me to see it so late, and everything. So yeah. How about you though? Like, what was it like for you? You obviously saw it first run, so.
I did see it first run. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought that it was a lot of the mysterious unknown force at work. I appreciated the. It was almost spiritual. There was a I don't want to say more than a hint of spirituality with it, just the way the direction they took everything with it. I thought that I almost wanted them to, when watching it, it's almost like I wanted them to go to the planet. I wanted them to evacuate, and then they got to that point where it's like they hit the 50% mark with losing power, and then they were going to go back to Alpha, and they were going to try to rough it out. And I'm thinking, why would they do that? But then there's everything that goes with it, that the planet is essentially dead.
Yeah, it's like a dead planet. Yeah.
So it really would have been worse for them to go to the planet than it would have been to
stay on Alpha and try to hopefully find someplace else. Yeah.
I
also felt like watching it, there was this weird sort of sense of almost hope of like, well, maybe now that it delivered these two here, whatever the mysterious unknown force, maybe it will take Alpha to the whatever it's planning to do next, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
like to the next realm, or maybe there was something beyond that, and really made you feel like everything was it was almost like connecting the dots, because when you think back of like Collision Course with Ara. And how,
that connect the Ara thing, and then even it almost feels like the space brain should have gone differently. Right? You see, right? Like it almost feels like if you were to track a course of what they go through the series, right? It's like things like Ara that happened on purpose. There's stuff that happened, right? It's like
Black Sun.
Black Sun happened on purpose. All these things were happening, but then the space brain was one where it didn't go right, and they ended up going through it and destroying it and whatever, So so it's fascinating. It is a fascinating concept. So yeah. I mean, it's the one thing I guess I feel, again, having have this conversation with you the past 2 weeks, is just developing an appreciation for this series, and really understanding the magnitude of what they created. And there's people like me who are coming at it from kind of a sci-fi science fiction into the moon base and stuff, but I started really thinking about it more. You kind of got me thinking about this more from what did they accomplish from a storytelling standpoint, and what the amazing places that they went and the things they encountered. And it's quite an adventure, that first season. It's quite an adventure. And even though the basic premise is, I think for some of us is challenging to kind of get our heads around, that it doesn't seem plausible, but it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, as I said to you earlier, it's not plausible at this point to travel on a starship going hundreds of times the speed of light and passing stars like streetlights. That's not right. And then running into the things they run into. So you could say the same thing about Star Trek. You could say the same thing about a lot of science fiction of that era. It's about the ideas, and it's about having a vehicle to get you to those ideas. And that's what Space 1999, I think, I'm realizing it's really about, was there was a vehicle to get us to interesting ideas. and interesting, and to put these characters through some interesting circumstances. And I really have sort of developed a new appreciation for the series in these conversations you and I are having.
No, that's wonderful,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy to hear that, because
Yeah.
I think that a lot of folks, a lot of different people enjoy this show for different reasons. Whether it is to see Martin Landau, Barbara Bain, and different members of the cast, if
Mhm.
it's for the stories, if it's for the special effects, it's
Mhm.
for the artwork, the art department, the exotic sets, and there's just really different aspects, and the fact that it's endured over this period of time. But
Mhm.
no, it makes me really happy to hear that, especially coming from your appreciation of the show over the years and seeing it from a different perspective. So that's
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. And I love having conversations like this, because I really just think that it's you definitely, as individuals, we get to learn from each other, and
Yeah.
there's things that we don't see for whatever reasons,
Right.
and then it's kind of eye-opening. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
appreciate your conversations with me, just from the different perspectives that you're looking at the series, and you're taking it in. And
Well, the other thing too is like being in a position where, having pitched ITV a couple times, reboots ideas on this, it's helping me understand sort of what the strengths of the IP are, like why, right? And why, when you say, hey, I want to reboot this, but I'd like to remove some of these aspects, that why there's some fans that push back and go, but those aspects are what make it Space 1999.
right.
Which also lends itself to the idea of maybe you don't reboot, which is why ITV has literally said to me, we don't know that we should reboot this, because we're
Right.
never going to make anybody happy, right?
Yeah.
And
It's a fine
yeah,
line.
it's a fine line. It really is.
It
It's
really
fascinating.
is.
Yeah. So
Brian says Space 99, it fits like a glove. It really does. And with all new sci-fi shows since Space 99, it's still my favorite of all time. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Mhm.
So no, it's great conversation, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And and the one thing I just wanted to comment too was I just love this closing scene of the episode. I just thought it was very appropriate. I think I felt like everything was brought, again, full circle. And
Mhm.
it's just, it gives Martin Landau, it gives Commander Koenig the last word, so to speak, at least for the
Mhm.
first season, where, it's, what does he say? He says, for us, for all mankind, there is a purpose. It's kind of ends on a positive note,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
is nice. Whoops.
You get that beautiful lighting.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah. I
So
always loved his office. What a great set. What a great.
yeah, I so missed that and I know that it was terrible. I mean, Barbara Bain has said that on many occasions, that just lighting that set was so difficult. They had to go through a lot, and it was so missed during the second season, and it just really it was.
Well, that's another reason why I'd love to recreate this show, because, man, I mean, there's so many things now with just LEDs alone.
Mm,
So many things that were cost prohibitive when they made that first season that now you could just knock out. There's still, the technology would just be the boom. You could do so many. I mean, think about all the technology and everything. The things that were challenges, it wouldn't be a challenge at all. And you could make them even better. Without changing the aesthetic. I'm saying the functionality of how you do it. That's the thing I always keep wishing they'd do with the Star Trek reboots or continue. Is like go back and instead of completely reimagining it, just take what they've got, but then use today's technology to just realize it a little bit with better, just better
right.
realize those old designs. That's the thing. Like, yeah,
It's one of my frustrations. I mean, not to go, I just don't know why they just don't want to honor it. I don't know what it is. I mean, everything looks so.
There's this weird thing. There's this weird thing where I've heard people say stuff like, those were old cardboard cheesy sets. They'll say things like that, right? And so, well, no one wants to see a show with those old cardboard cheesy sets. And I keep thinking, like, to anybody watching it back then who was into it, those were not cardboard cheesy sets. They just weren't. It was awesome. It was fantastic, right? And so my thought would be, instead of completely making it look like an Apple store or rethink, like, why don't you just take it and go, this was really awesome, but something, they did have limitations to what they could do on a limited TV budget as far as the materials that they built it with. Let's build it now with really, really good materials, but the exact same design.
Right.
Change how we light it, change how we structure it, right, and make it more durable, or even make it so we can, instead of having everybody and tilt the camera and they all have to go like that and everything, what if we actually build the set on a gimbal and we can do that, right? I mean, there's so many things you could do that say that could make that better, but they don't even try. That's the part that's so frustrating, you know.
And for those folks that actually even make comments like that, I would say go up to Ticonderoga, New York, and go see James Cawley's the Star Trek original series set tour, because when you, especially the bridge, when you're on that, it's amazing. And it's and to your point, what they could do today with with the technology, they could just essentially add to it, not desecrate it and mock it.
True. So my whole point was, I've always felt like if you ever do a reboot of Space 1999, which it would have to be, you have to keep the aesthetic. You just can't change the aesthetic. You just can't. It's because there's something they did that was so amazing, and that capturing lightning in a bottle, you have to just take that and you don't go changing that. It's so amazing. So yeah.
Brian just had one comment. He said, if ITV were to remake Space 99, it would have to be done right, be faithful to the original series, but also to add new aspects. Yeah. But Jeffrey, thanks. I know you have you're up against the clock because you're going to be doing traveling and everything, but I just want to say thanks for being on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And definitely we'll be on again and talking about a lot of cool stuff. So coming down.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, I'm glad everybody enjoyed the new opening credits for you. It was really fun and an honor doing that for you, and really excited to see where the future goes. So we'll just keep going. I'll come back in the next few weeks and share some stuff as we go. Maybe we can show some behind the scenes stuff of some of the production of the documentary and everything. So, but everybody on here who did support us in the Kickstarter, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And it did make a difference. We really appreciate it. So
that's awesome.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, safe travels.
All right,
and then I'll talk to you. I'm going to do the shout outs with everybody, folks.
Of course. All right.
Take care, Jeffrey.
Okay. Take care.
Bye. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. What I'm going to do is I am going to go to the shout outs. If you have any comments you'd like to post, please do so. One thing I did want to say is I'm going to share my screen real quick. Bear with me one moment. I always like to give Starlog magazine a shout out. Starlog issue number 2 back in the day featured Space 1999. So just wanted to put that out there for you Starlog lovers. And going to the shout outs, first thing I want to say is, and Sue was commenting about this earlier, and I did post this on the page. News broke on social media earlier this afternoon that Mark Goddard had passed away. He passed away on the 10th, just a few days ago. And for folks out there, I mean, Mark was obviously known, and iconic with his role in Lost in Space, playing Major Don West. And there was a really nice tribute. If you're friends with Bill Mumy on Facebook, or actually, if you go to the show's page, I shared it. And just very moving in regards to that. And Mark was a heck of a nice guy. And I had the liberty of meeting him several times at the Chiller Theater Convention, which took place in New Jersey. And it's been actually a few years since I've actually seen him. But again, very, very nice. And actually, he was very kind to my son, Ryan. And when Ryan was about 10 years old. And I just wanted to just give him a remembrance. So Mark will definitely be missed, and he will always be remembered. And again, I mean, he did a lot of acting work, and then he actually left acting. And then what he did was he went back to his roots, which was in Massachusetts. And I believe he got his master's, and he became a teacher, and he was, teaching inner city children, and, really, that had a lot of, social issues and dealing with a lot of tough stuff. So really, really just a really decent human being, heck of a nice guy. And he definitely will be missed. I want to give a shout out to friends Mike and Mary Beth, and they are on Sci-Fi Distilled, which is on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. They will be back this Wednesday, which is going to be the 18th, and they're going to be talking about the movie Underwater, which came out in 2020. I have not seen this movie, But definitely check it out. If you have not seen the film, check it out. And then you can also, watch Mike and Mary Beth discuss it. And again, that's going to be this Wednesday coming up. And that will be on the 18th. Want to give a shout out to friends at Country Gate Players, my friend Bill Scarrato, the owner of Country Gate Playhouse. And they actually have a show that's coming up for production if you are in the Belvedere, New Jersey area. And that is going to be Steel Magnolias. Now, you can visit their website for information for Country Gate. It's www.countrygate.org. Or you can go to Bill's website, which is www.billscarrato.com, in which Bill gives updates in regards to Country Gate Productions and then anything that Bill actually has going on as well. So they're only a few weeks out, and they are practicing right now. And the dates are between October 28th and November 5th. And again, that's Country Gate Players in Belvedere, New Jersey. I also want to give a shout out to Captain Phil's Planet on WUSB 90.1 FM, Stony Brook, New York. You can tune into the Captain. His schedule is on alternating Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And you can also catch him on Friday nights, which would be now, coming up at 9 p.m. And he broadcasts until 11:30 p.m. And in fact, he is going to be doing a discussion about season 2 of Strange New Worlds, and that's going to be next Friday, just to put that out there. In fact, he had invited me to come on to discuss it, and I believe Mike and Mary Beth from Sci-Fi Distilled and some other folks are going to actually be tuning in. We'll be on with Captain Phil to talk about that, so definitely mark that on your calendars and stay tuned. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to our friends at Trek Talking, a Star Trek podcast. We really appreciate their support of this show, and wanted to say thank you for your support. If you have the opportunity, you can check them out. They are on Facebook. And again, that is Trek Talking, a Star Trek podcast. And also, I want to give a big shout out to Martha from Studio One Thrift. I've been talking about Studio One Thrift over the last close to a year now, actually a year and a half. And Martha actually launched Studio One Thrift as an online store. Now, what has happened is she actually has a physical location, which is now opened. It opened just a few weeks ago. And you can check it out. You can find out information by going onto Facebook, or you can visit Martha's website, which is www.studio1thrift.com. And then also, if you're in the Pennsylvania area, in the Stroudsburg area, you can also look into the physical location. She's got a lot of cool stuff there, a lot of inventory. And again, Studio One Thrift showcases the lineup for all year long, all seasons. And quality, stylish, affordable clothing for men and women. Receive styling tips and information updates. All you need to do is register on the website when you visit the website. And again, that's www.studio1thrift.com. And next, I want to give a shout out to my good friend, Mr. Ross Amico. He's also the other half of this show for Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. Ross will be back with me on Sunday, which I'll talk about in a moment. But Ross also has a radio show that he does, and there are two shows. The first is Picture Perfect, which is on Fridays at 5 p.m. Now, that's 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And he also does The Lost Chord, which is on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And you can visit his blog, which he has on Facebook under Classic Ross Amico. If you do, be sure to follow and like his page. For information in regards to his upcoming updates and the show, you can visit there. Also, you can go to the new location where he is broadcasting is kwax.uoregon.edu. And again, that is kwax.uoregon.edu. And definitely check Ross out. And lastly, I just want to let everybody know Ross and I will be back this Sunday. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We needed to reschedule last Sunday, and we really appreciate you, the folks that reached out to us and to check. And there was some family stuff that was going on. So just to let you know, and again, your thoughts and appreciation of your concerns are there. So we will be broadcasting on Sunday, which is going to be October 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we're going to be talking about episode 206, which is An American Werewolf in London, the 1981 classic film. So we're very excited to be talking about that as Halloween month continues on Roy's Tie-Dye Sci-Fi Corner. So just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in, and we hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Hope you enjoyed the show tonight. As always, it's a pleasure to have Jeffrey on, and yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody shortly. And as I always like to say, live long and prosper. Have a great night, folks. Take care, and thank you. And we'll see you on Sunday. Bye-bye.